A $650 driver and a $250 driver share the same titanium and the same legal ceiling on how much energy the face returns to the ball. That ceiling is fixed by rule, not by price. 9 brands on this list are betting you never learn where it sits. 4 of them can explain it and still charge full price. This one's for anyone who's bought a new driver in the last 2 years and quietly wondered why last year's model suddenly felt obsolete. Not because your swing changed, because the calendar did. If you've never once questioned that, you're exactly the golfer this business model was built around, and there's no shame in it. Almost everyone standing in a pro shop assumes the price tag is tied to what's actually inside the head. By the end of this, you'll know exactly when that assumption holds up and exactly when it doesn't. I spent years on the retail and fitting side of this business, watching golfers get talked into a driver that was nearly identical to the one already sitting in their bag. Nobody in that conversation was lying to them exactly. They just weren't volunteering the one number that actually mattered. What you're about to hear isn't a guess, it's the paperwork. Here's the number that matters more than any logo on this list. 0.83. That's the coefficient of restitution cap the USGA locked in back in 2008 after years of watching driver faces get thinner and springier, closer every season to launching a ball harder than the rules were ever meant to allow. The maximum energy a driver face is legally allowed to hand back to the ball on impact. Every conforming driver from any brand, at any price, sits under that same ceiling. Titleist, TaylorMade, Callaway, none of them are allowed to exceed it, no matter what the sticker says. There are roughly 13,500 drivers on the current conforming list, and every single one of them stops at the same number. So the physics is capped. That doesn't mean every driver performs identically. Forgiveness, launch, spin and fitting still matter, and real engineering differences show up there. But no brand on this list can sell you unlimited face speed, and that's where the annual marketing story starts to come apart. Ownership explains why the industry keeps needing a reason to sell you a new one every year. It still doesn't explain what you should actually pay. That answer comes after the 9 names. Raw titanium and composite in a driver head runs about $10 according to one manufacturing breakdown that's circulated for years among club builders and fitters. Robotic welding and finishing ad may be 25 more. That's the actual club in your hand before a single logo gets attached to it, before a single tour player gets paid to swing it, before a single ad gets filmed. Manufacturers build in 45 to 60 points of margin on top of that before it ever reaches a retailer, landing wholesale somewhere between $175 and $240. Everything past that is retail markup stacked on a number that was already mostly margin. Compare that to a laptop or a printer, built from far more complex parts sold at a similar volume for less money. Golf clubs aren't expensive because the manufacturing is hard. They're expensive because nobody sitting between the factory and your wallet has a reason to make them cheaper. Now watch how that plays out brand by brand, because it plays out differently every time. 9 names running that play. Every one of them gets checked against the same question. Does this fact change what you should pay for the driver in your hands? If it doesn't, it's noise. Starting with the ones riding the play the quietest, because the quiet ones are usually the ones nobody bothers to check. Bridgestone spends its research budget across a massive global tyre business first, and the golf division gets whatever's left over, then prices as if it didn't. One name down and the next one turns the exact same story into an actual selling point. Honma builds some of the most expensive clubs sold anywhere in the sport. The brand actually went bankrupt in 2005, got bought out of that bankruptcy by a Chinese businessman in 2009, and went public in 2016 to raise capital for exactly the kind of global expansion that keeps prices where they are. Equipment forums have been saying the same thing about Honma for years. Usually some version of the same complaint. Gorgeous, well-built, and priced for a story that has nothing to do with how the ball comes off the face. A real share of what you pay has nothing to do with the coefficient of restitution and everything to do with lacquer, gold trim, and the story printed on the box. Srixon and Cleveland both answer to the same Japanese parent, Sumitomo Rubber, an $8 billion tire and industrial conglomerate, and both get marketed as if 2 entirely separate design philosophies built them from scratch, right down to separate tour staffs wearing separate logos on the same practice green. 2 names already sharing one balance sheet, Keep that in mind because it happens again on this list, and the next time it's a much bigger name. That's 3 names sharing 2 balance sheets. The next one just spent this year cleaning its own house, and it still didn't change the one thing that matters. Callaway runs one of the fastest release schedules in the sport, a new flagship most years, which means last year's driver starts depreciating before some golfers have finished breaking it in. Credit where it's due, the company also spent this year cleaning up its own balance sheet, selling 60% of Topgolf for $800 million in cash, and reverting its name back to plain Callaway Golf Company this January. Both things are true, neither one changes the release calendar. Titleist earns genuine trust on the ball side of the business, decades of it, holding 72% of professional tour ball counts this year alone. And that trust gets borrowed by the driver line, which runs the same 12-month full-price reset as everyone else, despite selling a fraction of the units that earned the trust in the first place. The company behind it, Acushnet, is majority controlled by a Korean parent called Misto, through a subsidiary called Magnus. In June of this year, Acushnet agreed to buy back over $50 million in stock directly from Magnus, and a financial teardown of the deal found something sharper underneath it. Of the $211 million Acushnet spent on buybacks last year, $125 million went straight to Magnus at $67.50 a share. Regular shareholders effectively funded part of the controlling owner's exit. Borrowed trust showing up on the balance sheet now, not just on the shelf. 5 names down. The 6th one isn't just another ownership story, it's an active bidding war right now, and whoever wins it will decide who's setting next year's price. TaylorMade built its entire public identity on yearly reinvention, which is a polite way of describing a driver that gets new paint and a new headline every season, whether the engineering underneath actually moved or not. It's owned by a Korean private equity fund called Centroid, currently trying to sell it to a Denver firm called Old Tom Capital for around $3 billion, a bid roughly 12% under what Centroid originally wanted. One of TaylorMade's own investors, a Korean fashion retailer that helped fund the original 2021 purchase, hired Goldman Sachs and threatened legal action to block the sale without its consent. Part of the money behind that original purchase came from Korean credit unions and farming cooperatives, ordinary savers whose contributions are tied up in a boardroom fight over a golf company they've never heard of. TaylorMade's own chief executive has said publicly he expects new ownership sometime this year. An engineer who used to help design tour-level equipment put the whole industry better than we could. It doesn't run out of new technology, it runs out of new things to call it. 2 names left on this list, and they don't just share a parent company the way Shrixon and Cleveland do. This time it's apparent. Neither brand puts anywhere near its marketing, and once you see it, you'll read every ad both of them run differently. Cobra is owned by Puma. Wilson is owned by Amer Sports. If you've watched more than one golf equipment channel this year, you've probably already seen where this is going, and you'd be right to expect it. In January, a Chinese sportswear company called Anta became the largest shareholder in Puma, in a deal worth close to $2 billion, while already controlling more than half of Amer Sports through a takeover it completed years earlier. Anta is the 3rd largest sportswear company on the planet, behind only Nike and Adidas, and golf isn't even close to its biggest move. It also bought the outdoor brand Jack Wolfskin from Callaway itself last year, back when Callaway was still operating under the Topgolf Callaway brand's name. 2 golf brands that look like rivals on the shelf now answer at different percentages to the same company. None of this is new information. MyGolfSpy reported the same connection back in March. What's still missing from every version of that story is what it actually means for the number on your receipt, and that's the part nobody's covered. And before this turns into a story about foreign money quietly buying up golf, look at who owns Callaway. Vanguard and BlackRock, 2 American asset managers holding stock for pension funds and index investors who've never held a driver either. A Seoul-based investor and an American asset manager are both just capital sitting behind a logo, waiting on a return. Treating one as suspicious and the other as invisible isn't analysis. It's a double standard. And this video isn't running it. None of that explains your receipt. Not the Puma stake, not the Acushnet buyback, not the Korean investors fighting over TaylorMade, not one word of any of it. It never did, and it never was going to. If you only came for the ownership chart, you already got it, and you got it a few months ago from someone else who made the exact same video with a dramatic music sting over it. Everyone else, stay with me, because this is where it actually gets useful. If breakdowns like this are useful to you, that's the whole reason this channel exists, telling you the part of the industry that never makes it onto the box before you hand over a card for it. Here's the part that should bother you more than any ownership chart ever could. That same driver, full price in February, is quietly discounted by September and gone for half price by Christmas, replaced weeks later by a new model built inside the exact same physics ceiling. Nothing about the ceiling changed between those two models, only the paint and the price tag did. Golfers were describing this pattern on forums a decade before any channel started making videos about it. One old thread put the whole cycle in 6 words that still hold up today. Free inside a box of Cheerios. There's one excuse the industry still leans on, and it deserves a straight answer before we get to who's actually earning your money. Blame a shrinking sport, fewer buyers chasing higher prices to make up the difference. That story used to be true. Golf lost roughly 6 million players in the decade after 2005, a stretch the industry still talks about like a wound that never closed. It isn't true anymore. Golf just posted its highest on-course participation since 2008, over 28 million players. And total participation, including off-course golf, is now above 48 million, up 57% in a decade. Pricing climbed while the sport shrank. Pricing is still climbing now that the sport is bigger than it's been in almost 20 years. The ceiling never moved either way. Only the excuse did. 9 names, 1 ceiling, the same play running underneath every one of them. Whether the ownership chart behind it is loud or completely silent. Now here's who didn't play it. Not 4 versions of the same answer. 4 completely different reasons to spend your money. 1 built on patience, 1 on being honest about its own price, 1 on cutting out the markup entirely, and 1 on staying too small for anyone to buy. Ping started in a garage in 1959. Named after the sound its first putter made on contact, and has stayed privately owned by the same family every year since, with no debt on the books and no lender pushing a faster release schedule to hit a quarterly number. Product cycles run longer than the industry average, not out of sentiment, but because nobody's calling in a loan on the company. Employees stay an average of 15 years. A detail brands running on a 5-year private equity clock don't get to put on their own website. When the person fitting you for the driver has been doing it for a decade and a half, that continuity shows up in the fitting itself, not just on a corporate history page. That's the patience version of earning your money. PXG is genuinely expensive, full sets running close to $5,000, built on nearly 900 patents funded by the billionaire who built GoDaddy. The honest case for it was never that it's cheap, it's that the price isn't hiding a repackaging trick underneath it. Whatever you think of building a golf company on 900 patents and no cost ceiling, the clubs aren't getting a cosmetic refresh every spring just to justify a fresh purchase from you. That's the honesty version. Sub 70 flips the model entirely, selling CNC milled irons direct to the golfer out of a facility in Illinois at a fraction of Big 4 pricing. Being fair to the counter-argument here, because it exists. Some golfers on equipment forums point out that big brand end-of-season discounts paired with a good local fitter offering free adjustments and service can close that price gap anyway. Fair enough if there's a shop nearby running 30% off in October. Says nothing for the driver still full price in March, the month you actually needed it, or for the golfer with no fitter down the road and no 30% sale to wait for. Markup skipped entirely. Tour Edge has stayed independently owned and family run for decades, building genuinely tested, fully conforming clubs, priced closer to what the object costs to make than what the marketing department spent convincing you to want it. It doesn't have the marketing budget of the 9 names above it, and on this list, that's the point. Too small to need the trick. If you think this was just an excuse to drag big brands, it wasn't. Titleist, TaylorMade, Callaway, none of them make bad equipment, they don't. The clubs were never the problem. The calendar taped to the side of them is, and the calendar is the part of the purchase nobody puts in the ad. If you're gaming one of the 9 right now, you didn't get taken either, and you shouldn't feel talked into anything just because you're hearing this now instead of before you bought it. A driver capped at 0.83 performs exactly the same on day 1 and year 3. The only mistake, if there was one, was paying full price for a sealing that was never going anywhere. Before you hand over a card for anything on this list, ask 2 questions out loud in the store. How many months has this exact model been on the shelf, and what actually changed in the head since last year's version? If the price hasn't moved and the answer is mostly paint and a new name, you've got your verdict before you've hit a single ball. If the fitter can't answer either question cleanly, that's information too, and it's worth exactly as much as an ownership chart. 9 names ran the calendar trick this year, 4 didn't. Next time somebody hands you an ownership chart and calls it the reason your driver costs what it does, you'll know exactly which question they left out.